Struggling to make your website layouts look polished and professional? Here's what most beginner layouts look like, and here's what a professional layout looks like. If you're designing sites like this, it's honestly not your fault. There is actually a secret formula that designers use that most beginners totally overlook. And today, I'm going to share it with you. So if you've ever looked at your website and thought, something is just off here. Maybe it feels cluttered, maybe it feels confusing, or maybe it lacks that just perfect seamless flow that makes everything come together beautifully. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to transform your website layout into one that hooks visitors, keeps them engaged, and inspires them to take action, whether that is clicking that buy button or reaching out to work with you. And the best part, designing a professional layout isn't actually as hard as it seems. It just takes a few insider tricks. The mistakes that you're making are much easier to fix than figuring out IKEA instructions, I promise you that. So make sure to watch the full video because by the end, you will know exactly how to create layouts that look polished, feel cohesive, and keep your visitors hooked. Here's the first thing that you need to know about creating a polished, professional website layout. Great layouts are not random. They follow a very specific formula, and the number one rule is this: content guides design. I will say it again. Content guides design. If you're making the design first and then you're trying to stuff the copy in to fit it, I am sorry to break it to you, but you're honestly doing it backwards. For example, if I took this layout and decided that I really love it, and then took my copy and inputted it, it would look like this. Feels a little off, right? The clear problem happening here is that there is just way too much content for that layout. And this happens so frequently. Sometimes if you're working with a client, they will give you content and you think, oh, I need to have it exactly the way that they gave it to me. That was all one paragraph, therefore that needs to be one section, and that's not actually true. It's up to you as the website designer to figure out what layout fits what amount of content. So the fix is to always start with your content. Before you even think about how it's going to look, ask yourself, what is the most important thing I want my visitor to see or do here? That's what your layout should highlight. Let's take the same bit of text and look for a more fitting layout. Here's 8 potential layouts. Which do you think would work best? So of all the potential layout options that we have, this one is the most fitting for the most amount of content and copy. Even still though, I would say that this giant chunk of text is still too much for one single section, and so it needs to be broken up into multiple sections. So here we have the design of this layout just actually on the page. Again, it can fit a lot of content in there, but even still, I had to chunk up my one giant piece of text into 3 different sections to allow the content to actually properly fit the space. So yeah, how much cleaner and more intentional does this look? By simply letting the content guide the design and doing a bit of tweaking to breaking up my content into separate sections, everything starts to fall into place perfectly. Remember, every great layout is intentional. It's not about cramming as much as you can into every single corner. Instead, it's about asking yourself, what do I want people to notice first? What's the most important part of this content? And then how can I guide them to that? When you start with that mindset, your designs will look instantly more professional. And if you're feeling like, I'm not sure if I'm cut out for this, honestly, it gets easier once you've done it a few times and kind of get the hang of it. So let's do a few more sections so you really get this, because honestly, if you get this, you're about 90% of the way there. Here's all the text from my most recent homepage redesign. Let's again look at the copy and the possible layouts, and I'll show you which one I ultimately settled upon. So for this bit of copy here, it's let's say a medium amount of text for a section, and I need to think about which of all my potential layout options fit for this piece of content best. I decided that this layout fits best. Now, why does this layout work really well? So I have in the top left corner, pub quiz, and then on the top right, 45 seconds. Now the thing is, both of those things are kind of like fun text, but it's not super important for people to really read those bits, if that makes sense. It's just kind of added visual decoration, let's say, to the page. And so then I have a really large heading a smaller area where I can put a line or two of text, and then my call to action button. This is really fantastic in that it is not busy stuff happening everywhere. If I also had a chunk of text happening down the left-hand side here, I would really not have any like negative space in the area, so that's not fantastic. The way that it's laid out, it allows me to have my bit of text up here and the bit of text up here, which is kind of like cute additional ideas, but again, not actually like vital text on the page, if that makes sense. My headline is standing out really well, and I have a reasonable amount of text for the paragraph happening there too. Okay, the next bit of text which I have for this homepage is on the house like the perfectly brewed Italian espresso. These resources are petite but powerful. So what layout fits the best for that one? It's a fairly short amount of text. It's kind of, again, like decorative, the perfectly brewed Italian espresso, petite but powerful. It's adding character, it's adding brand vibe to the website, but it's not, again, actually like important text that someone really needs to read. So take a look at all these layouts and think about which one you think fits best. This is the layout which I ultimately chose for this section, and here's what it looks like in real life. I have a number of images happening in the background. It's adding a lot of visual interest. We can very clearly see the text for the on the house area. For the perfectly brewed Italian espresso, these resources are petite but powerful. Again, that's kind of like decorative text adding to the brand vibe. Not so important that you actually read the thing, but just adds a bit of character basically to the website. And so this section, again, it is more photo dominant than it's dominant on the text, and that is purposeful and intentional because the text is quite a short amount and kind of that character adding text. The next bit of text I have is this here. Again, take a look at all the possible layout options and think about which one you think fits best. This is a section promoting some of my freebies. So again, not a ton of text, quite short, but important that you genuinely can read the thing, that you can very much so see the text, unlike maybe the section before that one. So this is the design that I ultimately chose for this section. The reason I picked this one is because it allows me to really make sure that each of the opt-in areas and courtesy gifts have really its own space. They're very clear, they're very easily readable, they're very structured in the layout, that it's like one row below the next one, so that you can quickly differentiate between the three different opt-ins with a line in between all of them. And then we do have a little bit of a heading happening on top. And because it is kind of a, let's say, boring section design, there's not a ton happening. I added a little graphic happening up there as well, which kind of relates to the whole like on the house theme, which I had mentioned in the previous section. Okay, coming on down my homepage, if we head to my courses section where it has a little preview of the 3 different courses which I have, this is the text for that area. Now, I would say that is way too much text for any one section. So I have broken it up into 3 different sections, and each section is for each course. Having one section, one course is very logical, and it clearly defines and separates the different courses from each other, so people don't get confused about which course I'm talking about if it were, say, all one section. So taking a look again at our potential layouts, think about which one you think actually fits to the content of this section. This right here is the layout which I ultimately chose for this section. Okay, so why does this work? There is a fair amount of text which is needed to explain what the course is actually about. I want to make sure I have some sort of a heading to really like ground the entire section and kind of give the topic of this section. I have a image happening on the left-hand side, text all happening on the right-hand side. That is very good because it is adding some visual interest with the image while still giving the text, which is very important that people do actually read this bit. It's giving it its own space to really be clear and read. Now, as I mentioned, I have 3 courses, and so I didn't want to repeat the same layout in the exact same way in the following section, because that just looks a little bit boring if it happens consistently. So I've taken basically the exact same layout and I've just flipped it backwards. So image is happening on the right-hand side, text is happening on the left-hand side, and then when we go down to the third one, it's flipped back the other way again. If you have something that is very similar, say you're talking about one opt-in gift, then the next opt-in gift, then the next opt-in gift, or you're talking about service 1, then service 2, then service 3, then it is very good to use a consistent design, because that's kind of indicating to the brain, oh, it's a similar thing to the last thing. It's kind of still within this like grouping. It's not like we're talking about your about area, about section, and then we're talking about your freebies, and then we're talking about your offerings or something, and they all have the same layout. That would be odd, but because these are 3 very related topics, 3 related courses, let's say, they're all courses, then it makes sense to use the same design just a little bit varied up to add some visual interest. By the way, if you are wondering how I even figured out what to actually write on this homepage, I actually have a homepage content planner, which will guide you through what to actually write. If you would like that, do comment the word planner below and I will get you the link to it. So to ensure you're doing this correctly, here's a few quick tips on things you want to ensure that you're doing in every section and layout design that you have. First thing is divide your ideas and content into sections so that each visual section is one topic or idea. So again, if you want to talk about on your homepage a little bit about you, that should be one section. If you then want to talk about your freebies, that should be another section. If you want to talk about your student successes, that's another section. Or your rave testimonials from clients, again, that's another section. Those are all different topics, different ideas, and each different topic or idea should be a different section. Similarly to tip 1, tip number 2, every section should have a specific purpose. There is often, but not always, a call to action in each section. Depends on the situation. Sometimes a section, its purpose could be a bit of like storytelling or a bit of like getting to know and understand your brand. Maybe it's showcasing a product or guiding someone to some sort of call to action. Really think about what is the purpose of this section. And again, how do I choose a layout that best helps me get the person to do the thing I want them to do in this specific section. Third tip is it's up to you as the designer to know when to stop one section and start the next. When your client gives you copy or text, it's probably going to be one giant wall of text, and you are going to need to use your logic to decide how to chop that up. Another thing which I really like to do with my sections and my layouts is to change up from having a photo background to a colored background to something with a photo to something with a color. Basically, I don't want like photo background, photo background, photo background, photo background, because that might start to feel a little busy. Unless, let me say this. Rules are made to be broken. If you have experience, you can break them. If there's some things that you can do, I'll show you specifically on that one, actually. If we go to my courses page, I do have photo background, photo background, photo background, photo background. So I'm actually breaking the rule I literally just told you. But what I have done here is I have changed up that there is a little like dividing line in between each section. And the primary content is actually, the image isn't the most visually dominating thing in this section. It's actually, we have like a giant square which then all the content is put on top of, if that makes sense. So just something to keep in mind. The next thing you want to keep in mind is to have empty space, intentional empty and blank space in your design. I remember there was a story, and I'll see if I can find it, and if I can, I'll put it on the screen here. But there was someone who took out an entire full page newspaper advertisement and put a teeny tiny little bit of text right in the middle of the page, and everything else around it was blank. And now if you think about that, you might think, well, that's a giant waste to take out an entire full page, pay for an entire page in a newspaper to then just have the tiniest bit of a text. But to be honest, it was genius because that thing was therefore so impactful. Your eye was drawn. It was very clear what you should be looking at, as opposed to if they had just taken out a tiny little piece of the page, or if they had alternatively taken out the entire page advertisement, but just written stuff all over the entire thing. You wouldn't be drawn to the most important thing. And so here's a section design, which is a really good example of a great use of empty space. The vast majority of this section doesn't have that much going on. And I know this is very meta. I'm promoting my YouTube channel on this section, which I'm talking to you about in a YouTube video. But yeah, so there's a very small amount of text, there's a big title, there's a little video, and then there's just a lot of empty space around it. And honestly, that's a good thing because it is very clear to someone what this section is about and the one thing they should do on this section. So remember that empty space draws your attention more than shouting all over and filling up your entire page. The next tip, which you do need to balance a little bit with the one I just mentioned on blank space, is this one. You want to make it visually interesting. You want to add maybe background images or images on top of the area, or maybe some doodles or some sort of, graphic flourish, let's say, while also not getting too wild that you actually overpower the copy and the main point of the section. So that's something which you really need to just kind of like have a gut feel for. Have I made this visually interesting, or is this literally just like giant wall of text on page? That's not great. And again, tip number 7, make sure you vary the section layouts so it's not all the same thing again and again and again and again down the page. That is a rule which can be broken, but if you're a beginner, I would maybe just trust me on that one for now. Okay, so hopefully you've gotten the point. Look at your copy, figure out if it needs to be chunked up in some sort of way or made into smaller sections and paragraphs. Pick a fitting layout for that content, and then also a few best practices that you should follow. Now, you know you've understood this if you can observe a layout and tell me what's wrong with it. So take a look at this section. If your gut feeling has been trained, you can tell in an instant that this looks so off. It is absolutely awful. But why? That's the key thing that you need to understand. Do me a favor, pause the video, write down in the comments all of the things that you observe which are wrong with this section, and then actually comment it, and then press play again and see how many of them you got correct. There's honestly like a million things wrong with this section, but there's definitely at least 10 that you should be able to identify. Give yourself a score in the comments of how many you got right or wrong, and I'm gonna go make myself a coffee while you do that. Okay, back. Here is a list of 10 things that are so wrong with this section. First, there is way too much stuff happening in this section. There can't really be any hierarchy because it's just like too many things going on. There's also hardly any empty space. We basically just have like giant image, wall-to-wall text. So pretty much no negative space happening here. Everything is competing for attention. There is no visual background change between this section and the next one, so it all kind of just like molds from one into the next. Also, the layout is the same, one section to the next. It's also an awful layout. It's just wall-to-wall text on the page, and it's again the same one to the next. Now again, this is a rule that can be broken if you are kind of doing the same thing like on my courses homepage. You could see like it was the same layout, just like switched and alternated, like flipped backwards and forwards a bit because it was like the same topic and idea courses. However, this here, let's say this is like two completely different like ideas and bits of text and everything. One is talking about bonuses and one is talking about something else. Then it just doesn't make sense to have the same layout for the two. We also have two photo backgrounds, one after the next with no divider in between. Again, the rule can be broken, but it is harder to pull off successfully. It would be better in this situation to have the maybe first section, one with a background photo, followed by the second section being like a solid colored background. For this section specifically, the content doesn't at all fit to the layout. So what I'm talking about here is bonuses for one of my courses. And so there's 3 different bonuses. And so 3 things would ideally be in 3 columns side by side, not just going straight down the page. So now this, which I've highlighted here, is the text for one bonus. And then the third bonus has so much more text. Now, in this awful layout, or even a better layout, which would be 3 columns side by side, the problem would be that this third bonus has so much more text than the second bonus and the first bonus. So it would look very off if I put it side by side, because one would be significantly longer than the others. So the things that I could do in that situation is either, because it's 3 things, to make it look a bit more intentional, you could take the longest text one and put it in the middle. You wouldn't want it on the end. Or alternatively, you could just tweak the text in either way. So that could be maybe adding a longer description to the first and second bonus, or tightening up the third bonus. Okay, I've just made a couple tweaks to significantly improve this layout happening here. The one other thing to note though with this one is that now that I've done this, it's really weird because the main focal point of this image that we had was this girl sitting at a laptop. But the problem is that now you can't see her at all, really. And the image just doesn't make sense when the main focal point of the image is the middle of the image and we can only see the edges now. So we need to pick another image to be in the background here that kind of has, let's say, like pretty edges, or the something, I don't know, that looks a bit more fitting around the sides of it. There we go. This image fits a lot better into the background of this section because there's actually no like main one focal point of this image or anything. It's really just like, it looks like a background image. It's just an image of actually some like beautiful water with some lovely colors on it. And so that fits because there's nothing that you're supposed to be seeing in that image, if you know what I mean. Okay, one of the other problems with this layout, wall-to-wall text. Never do that, ever, ever, ever. Also, if I were to determine, okay, it's actually really tough to read this text with this image there, for example, then maybe I want to delete out the image. Now the problem, along with still awful layout choice, is that there's just no visual interest happening on this section because it's just a bunch of text and a white back or a green plain background. The other issue happening with this section is that there's no like standout aspect. There is no focal point to this section. There is like one line for those ready to, that's like a slightly different heading type, but even still, it's still not sort of like bold enough to be a real heading, if that makes sense. So it's just a lot of different text. The other issue number, are we on 10 yet? Is that there is changing colors and also changing font sizes without like a logical reason for them to be changed. So that's not great either. Okay, so hopefully you know a heck of a lot more than you knew 20 minutes ago, but potentially the most vital thing to remember when you're designing layouts is this. What is actually happening in the visitor's life while they're on your website? Well, it would be so nice if someone got all cozy and settled in for a good read and made their cup of tea and sat on their favorite reading chair and really appreciated that website that you literally just spent ages making. They're actually not doing that. So you need to get strategic with what's going on your website, remembering that realistically, your visitor is doing life and they are looking for a quick solution to whatever their problem is. And so you need to write your website copy and also design with that fact in mind. And I know that that might sound like vague and kind of like, well, how do I actually put that into practice? So I have another tool for you that will help you understand this one, hopefully. So it's my Start Your Website workbook. I will link it for you in the description below. It'll help you think about who this website is for, what needs to be on it, and vitally, and probably more importantly, what doesn't need to be on it, or what is just fluff. It'll help you get to the darn point quickly, guide visitors where they need to go, while still bringing across your brand story and ethos as well. So now you're a layout expert. What about the tech skills to build a website? How do you actually use a website builder exactly? Well, watch this video next and I will give you the most thorough, wonderful, beginner, step-by-step website building tutorial that you have ever seen.